Okay, today we'll be tearing apart a carburetor for an Arctic Cat 400 2003. And we'll be tearing it apart, cleaning it, and then reassembling it. So we'll start out, here's where your throttle comes in at. Your throttle cable comes into here. And obviously if we've gotten it to this point, we've removed this cover because the cable runs in here, that'll stay with the machine. So there is where your throttle comes in at. And that slides up and down, and what that does is turn this butterfly here. So adjusting the idle is simply adjusting that butterfly. So when you turn this, you're pushing this, essentially pushing on that cable and allowing more air to flow through there. So that is the throttle cable. Now we'll flip it over and we'll take apart the bowl area. There's 4 Phillips screws. When you're draining a carburetor, just for the year, or if you're trying to get bad fuel out of it, all you really have to do is loosen this screw here, and that'll allow fuel to drain out here. You want to make sure that you've got a hose coming off the bottom of this nipple here so that you're not draining fuel right onto the top of your motor. Now we'll pull this bowl. There's 4 Phillips screws here. Here's your air fuel screw here. It's a flathead screw, and I'll show you how to adjust that here in a minute. We'll pull the bowl off here. You want to make sure that this is clean from debris, and we'll blow through that with compressed air. Here's your O-ring here. This is a common issue where this is leaking, so you want to make sure that O-ring is good. Now to adjust the fuel screw, the air fuel screw, you turn it, when you're cleaning it, you turn it all the way in and you count those turns. So what I do is half a turn, full turn, 1.5, 2, 2.5. 2.5 turns is what that screw was out. So if you read in your manual that it needs to be 2 turns out, that is simply how you do it. You screw it all the way in until it's snug, and then loosen it up. 1, 2, 1.5, 2. Okay, now we've got your pilot jet, and the pilot jet is farther down in here. You want to take a small flat screwdriver, and you want to make sure you put pretty good pressure down so that you don't strip that brass screw out, the head of it, and pull that pilot screw out. And you can just shake it out of there like that. Now what I do is take GumOut carbon choke cleaner, spray through it this way, then take compressed air and blow through it this way. Now you should be able, when you hold this up to light, you should be able to see through that tiny jet there. And if you can't see through it, then you've got debris in there, and you want to make sure you keep doing that. You can grab a small wire, try to run it through there. It has to be a very fine wire for that to work. Now we've got your main jet here, and we've got your secondary main jet here. And this main jet is where your needle slides up and down into, so the needle that you see here will slide right down into this jet. So depending on altitude, these a lot of times will need changed if you're going higher altitude or lower altitude. Now you just pull this jet here, and you want to make sure, same thing, compressed air through there, make sure it's clean, make sure there's no debris stuck in there, make sure you can see through it. So grab the compressed air, blow through it, hold up to light, make sure you can see through it. Now we have your secondary main jet, and that's this other jet on top here. And this is a smaller size than your main jet. Same thing, compressed air, make sure you can see through it. Okay, now to take your bowl out, to take your float out, there's a pin right here, and you put pressure, pushing that pin out there, and this pin will just slide right out. There is your float, there's your needle here. This is called your seat. So you've got your needle and seat. So if you've got fuel leaking, you either adjust your needle, and that's by that little metal tab there. You can adjust it down if it's leaking fuel. If that doesn't fix your problem, inspect this needle, make sure there's no wear on it, make sure there's nothing stuck in your seat here, and make sure that this isn't grooved around the rubber tip of this needle. Now, same thing, you want to make sure that you can blow through where the fuel comes in at. Fuel comes from the tank into this nipple here, into your bowl area here, and blow through there. Make sure that that area is clean, blow the other way. And when you blow through compressed air through here, it'll come out here. Now on these, you want to make sure that you blow through here as well. When you blow through this one, you could potentially blow that needle up into this area. So you want to make sure that I stand back when I do that, so we don't blow that needle out. If you blow compressed air through this area here, it'll raise that slide. If it doesn't do that, or it sticks up there, then you've got problems. If it doesn't do that, you may have a rip in your boot up here, and we'll pull that next. So we'll put this back together. Your needle and seat and the float will go slide back down in there. Just push the pin, and this shouldn't be hard to do. If it's been sitting for a while, it may be gummed up, and you can use a pick to push that through, but you don't want to put too much pressure on these tabs here. These are aluminum and break very easily. So your secondary main jet goes back on there. Tighten these up, and these are brass jets, so you don't have to put a lot of pressure on them. Your main jet right on top here, and that sits in your main jet holder is what that's called. And that can be replaced too. And you just simply 10 millimeter wrench and remove that, and it just threads in there. Snug that up, put your pilot jet in there. And then carb cleaner on this. Blow through it with compressed air. Slide that back down. You want to make sure that that seals well. And going into aluminum, these screws going into an aluminum carburetor, they do not have to be extremely tight. So I tighten them all down, make sure everything's seated properly, and then I'll snug them up. As long as you have a good O-ring on there, you just snug them, and that will seal just fine. Now to pull the slide here. This is the slide and the diaphragm. And I always take one finger, put pressure down on it, because it's spring loaded. It won't pop off and go flying, but you want to make sure that your diaphragm doesn't catch on anything. It's rubber, and if it's ripped, it'll need replaced. You don't want to fix those, or you're just going to have that issue again. So pull that off of there. There's the cap there. There's your spring and your holder there. This is your needle holder. It goes all the way down into the bottom. And here's your diaphragm. And here is your slide and your needle. And this has got a little bit of dirt in there. So we'll take clean that out with compressed air. Now putting this back together, it'll only go one way. And what I generally do is we'll put this down, and you don't want to get carb cleaner on this diaphragm or fuel. Slide down. You want to make sure your needle goes into where it's supposed to go, right in the middle there. And this is sometimes a little bit of a trick, and you do not want to crease this. So if it got fuel on it, then you want to wait for it to dry out first. And this might have too much fuel on it. You can leave it in the sunlight warm it up just a little bit. You just want to dry that fuel out so this diaphragm seats properly in there. And it is a little tricky. I try to push down and put a little bit of pressure in all the areas so that it stays down. Then you take this cap and you slide it right down on top. You do not want to do that if this hasn't seated properly like it's doing now, and we'll have to dry this out. Because right now it looks too big and you think, no way will that ever fit in there. But you need to dry this out first before you put this cap on. Otherwise it won't seat properly. It'll pinch this diaphragm and it'll rip and it won't seal. And remember, when we sucked air through here, when we pushed air through here, this slide went up. It will not do this if that's not sealed properly. So you want to let that dry out first. A lot of times I'll just stick it in the window, stick it in the sunlight, where it's going to get some airflow, and that'll dry out and it'll shrink back down. You'll be able to fit it right back down. Put the Phillips screws back in and you are all set.